Yes, horror. The genre that spawned a new wave of Let's Players in the early 2000s, gave adult diapers a new use, and caused many players to punch holes in their screens out of pure fright. Horror games are among my favorite games of all time. I played almost all of them. No, that's a lie, I haven't. But I played a lot. So, what is the best horror game? Well, if I asked you that, I'd get a variety of answers, right? Like, the Resident Evil franchise, of course. Outlast, both of those are fantastic. Amnesia, of course. That's a great game. But, guess what? You're wrong.
What?
I've reached into the depths of the astral plane, scoured every inch of the universe, and I am certain that I have found the best horror game of all time. That's right, people of Earth, I have found the best horror game of all time. No, this is not a joke, though this opinion is coming from one. I mean, just look at this game, oh, it's so beautiful. Alien Isolation released in 2014 and was developed by the Total War Team Creative Assembly. Though it initially launched to find mixed reviews, IGN, it has since gone on to make its way to platinum and has also accumulated a big fan base. Many people wanted a sequel to this game, but unfortunately Sega was not happy with the sales, though the end of this game does set up another game. The story takes place after the events of the 1979 classic Alien movie and before the 1986 Aliens film. You play as Amanda Ripley, Ellen Ripley's daughter, as she gets tipped off about the black box that's been recovered from the Nostromo. That's the ship from the first movie, just in case you didn't know. Amanda heads to the Sevastopol station where it's being held to finally have closure on what exactly happened to her mother in the first film. Once she arrives, it's clear that something is wrong and the horror unfolds.
Shit.
It's safe to say that this title was and still is severely underrated, with many people complaining that the game was too difficult. IGN? As someone who has beaten the game on the hardest difficulty, I can safely say that this game is hard, but totally doable if you have the patience and can make decisions on the fly. In fact, the difficulty is one of the main reasons why this game is the best horror game, in my opinion. This is a very slow-paced game, and that is intentional thanks to the self-governing AI that this title was based around. Creative Assembly deeply cared about the source material and wanted to replicate the look and feel of Ridley Scott's 1979 classic Alien. They did so by creating an in-game AI that is able to think, see, smell, and even hear the most subtle of things, like knocking a wrench off a table. This AI is unlike any game AI even to this day. The alien even has states of calm, curious, and aggressiveness, each accompanied by its own body language and behaviors associated with them. For instance, if the alien is agitated, it can display his tail up and his arms further back from its body, mirroring jocks at the gym after lifting one dumbbell. This AI really does test your ability to think on the fly, outsmart your opponents, and pick the right times to jump on certain actions. Not only is this thing smart, but it's downright terrifying. It's capable of traversing vents and catching up to any prey faster than Will Smith's transition from laughing to slapping, so don't even think about running. The alien isn't the only thing that the player has to contend with, and while these secondary enemies don't emulate the same AI as the alien, they are not to be taken lightly. Even a single misstep can cause more damage than good. These secondary enemies consist of human survivors that have outcasted those not in their groups, and the stiff, creepy humanoid Seegson synthetics that will target you when spotted due to the station AI that has gone rogue. All the enemies come together to make a very deadly combination of misfortune for the player, especially when all three make their way into encounters, which this game is not afraid to do. This may sound a little overbearing, however, the game starts off really slow and allows the player to fully get their bearings before any extreme cases like this are presented. Pacing in a game like this is absolutely everything, and while at some points it can be a little slow, they nailed it. Times where you are simply wandering the seemingly desolate space station and can only hear the rumbling of the station's infrastructure at work tend to be some of the most atmospheric moments in the game, and each should be taken in and admired. All this is backed up by stellar graphics and an impressive lighting system that still manages to keep up with modern titles. So if this hasn't convinced you yet, which I mean it should have, come on, what more do you want from me? Just kidding, I have more. Alien Isolation has great level design. Players are fully able to go back to parts of the game to explore them if you missed anything or have unlocked a tool that will open doors in later areas. This is where it adopts an almost Resident Evil style exploration loop. There are many instances of doors, vents, and computers that can't be unlocked until you acquire a certain tool in the game later on by progressing the story. Some of these rooms and computers can give the player access to collectibles, weapons, resources, and logs that help paint a better picture of the story prior to your arrival. The world building here is second to none, and the team managed to pull off an incredibly detailed world oozing that lived-in vibe. Floors have mop streaks, loose items litter the floors, and blood soaks the walls. Paperwork sits discarded on top of desks, and every button that lines the crowded walls looks like it has a function. This is something a lot of games struggle with, but not Isolation. This attention to detail is some, if not the best in the genre. Through discovery, the player can find and access logs that will tell a story of the culture the station inhabited. If you choose to read them, you'll gain insight into a failing corporation clinging to life, marshals during their struggle to maintain order amongst the chaos, and just the back and forth of day-to-day residents of Sevastopol. Places like maintenance bays, medical wards, and cafeterias have the appropriate look and feel. This is a station that was meant to house families to work remotely, and it definitely feels this way. The game heavily incentivizes exploration as looting and scouring for resources plays directly into the game's crafting mechanic. The crafting mechanic is something every player will have to utilize to get through encounters without using traditional means of stealth. The sheer diversity in these tools really allows the player the freedom of how they wish to tackle each objective. A noisemaker, for instance, does just that, it makes noise. Throwing one will allow the player to distract an alien for a brief time. But what if the alien isn't actively hunting you and say your main obstacle is a group of survivors? Well, guess what? You can throw that noisemaker at the humans, thus prompting the alien to surface and dispose of them for you. So the alien can act as your tool. It's actually super interesting. While these tools are useful, it's how it affects the alien that really matters. The same tricks will only work on the alien so many times before it grows accustomed to them and instantly knows that you're somewhere nearby. It's super awesome because this game constantly wants you to adapt to the new situation and overcome it. The alien is the central pillar of this game, and that is why this title is so different. Almost every decision you make in this game will have to reflect how the alien will or will not interfere. There are many different weapons at your disposal too. These include a revolver, a shotgun, bolt gun, and flamethrower, with the fire-spewing device being the only one that can actually repel the alien. These other weapons have their time to shine when the alien is off-screen for some of the later game scripted sequences. While this is certainly not an action game, the shooting does feel pretty good and the guns have weight. While the shooting may not be the most important part of this game in the grand scheme of things, something that is very important in a horror game like this is the constant dread and fear of being vulnerable despite having tools that can aid you. This game perfects this. For instance, the motion tracker gives the player a third eye by giving off a reading of movement nearby. However, it's only specific about the distance from you. It does not show the level that the creature is on. Listening is just as important as seeing here, as listening to clues of its whereabouts can determine your fate, whether that be in the form of footsteps, noise coming from the vents, or the numerous horrifying noises that this perfect organism will emit. There are seldom moments when you feel completely safe. This game isn't necessarily scary, but it is on the stressful side because you never know when the alien will emerge. A great example of this tension is how the game handles save stations. There are no autosaves, forcing the player to fully rely on the safety of a save station. If you die during an encounter, you were sent all the way back to the last manual save, further cementing the fact that the player must use caution and strategy when traversing this game world. If you happen to be unlucky enough to get caught by the alien as you're entering a save station and it kills you, guess what? You're sent all the way back.
Shit.
An average run will clock in at around 20 hours or so. This isn't including collectible hunting or additional exploration. Most horror games lose their tension long before their credits roll. Look, I love you, RE7, but I'm looking at you. However, I can safely say this game remains nail-bitingly stressful up until the end. The story does a good job of getting people invested, but this certainly isn't the best or most intriguing story out there. It does a good job of keeping the game moving, and as a massive fan, I enjoyed it as it plays directly off the established lore without messing up the timeline. The writing is believable, and each character is well voice acted. There are even some likable side characters, though your face-to-face interactions with them will be few and far between. 90% of this game will see Amanda on her own, hence the name Isolation. With all of these pieces of the overall pie coming together, I absolutely think that this is the best horror game of all time. Is it perfect? Absolutely not, nor is any game. But what it brings to the table, it does very well with high production values, passion, and groundbreaking AI. This title should be played by every horror enthusiast, especially now that the game can be accessed for a heavily discounted price. I would love to hear your thoughts on this, or what your favorite horror game is, or what you think the best horror game is. Maybe you don't like the genre, whatever the case is, let me know. Let's have a civil discussion in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching.